When my kids were little, I liked to tell them flannel board stories. So I thought I would try telling you a flannel board story today. The story is from the Bible, and it's a true story, and it is called David and Goliath. Great trouble had come to the land of Israel. The Philistines, who lived in a land nearby, wanted to make the Israelites their servants and do all their hard work. They gathered their armies together on a mountain facing Israel, and the Israelite army, in defense of their freedom, stood on an opposite mountain. Between them was a valley. The Philistines felt sure that they would get what they wanted because they had a man on their side who was so large and so powerful that everyone was afraid of him. His name was Goliath. The Bible tells us that his height was 6 cubits in a span, which is over 10 feet. In those days, and this is Goliath, in those days, Philistine warriors wore very heavy metal coverings, which they called armor. For example, Goliath had a helmet of brass which covered his head. He also had a coat of mail, which is a metal covering of brass for his body. This coat weighed 5,000 shekels, or about 157 pounds. His spear's head also weighed about 19 pounds. He truly looked as though he could win any fight. Goliath walked in front of the Israelite armies and told them to choose a man from among them to fight with him. And if the Israelite killed him, the Philistines would be their servants. But if he, Goliath, killed the Israelite, then the Israelites must be the servants of the Philistines. After this, Goliath said in a loud voice, "I defy the armies of Israel this day. Give me a man that we may fight together." When King Saul and the Israelite army heard this, they were filled with terror, and they were greatly afraid. King Saul offered the man who would fight with Goliath great riches of money and other precious things. He also promised him his daughter to marry. Now, at this time in the land of Israel, at Bethlehem, lived a very fine young man named David. He was the youngest son of a man named Jesse. He had the job of tending the family's sheep. David had been taught to love the Lord and keep his commandments. He had great faith in his heavenly Father. He was sure the Lord meant what he said, that if he obeyed and kept the commandments, he need never worry about the Lord keeping his promise to bless him and care for him. David was a young man whom both his father Jesse and our Heavenly Father loved and trusted. 3 of David's older brothers were in King Saul's army. As any parent would, their father Jesse worried about them. He wondered if they were well and were getting enough to eat. One day, Jesse asked David to go to his brothers and take them some food. He told David to take his brothers a sack of parched or dried corn and 10 loaves of bread. He also told him to take 10 cheeses to their captain. David was happy to do this for his father. He was happy too to be able to visit his brothers. So he left the sheep with a keeper and started out early one morning to do as his father asked. David arrived at the camp just as the battle was beginning. So he ran among the Israelite troops to look for his brothers. As he found them and began to talk with them, Goliath, the Philistine, came forth and repeated the same challenge and invitation as he did every day. Again, no one accepted Goliath's challenge. All the Israelite men were very afraid and ran away when they saw and heard Goliath. David wondered why the Lord's people were so afraid. He asked the men nearby why the armies of the living God should let this giant defy them. When David's brother Eliab heard of this, he became angry. He felt that his little brother was interfering in matters that were none of his concern. In an unkind, accusing voice, he asked David why he had left the sheep and told him that all he really wanted was to come and see the battle. It was not long, however, before King Saul heard about David and sent for him. David told the king that the Israelites did not have to be afraid. He was willing to go and fight with the Philistines and kill the giant Goliath. But King Saul was concerned. David was very young and not a trained warrior. Goliath had been a warrior all his life and was much better able to fight than David was. Then David told King Saul how he had once protected his father's sheep from a lion and a bear that had come and taken a lamb out of the flock. He told how he had gone after them and killed them both, the lion and the bear. He would do the same thing with Goliath. He told King Saul that the Lord had helped him before and declared, "He will deliver me out of the hand of this Philistine." King Saul was impressed. "Go, and the Lord be with thee," he said. As David prepared to meet Goliath, Saul had him put on a coat of armor and a brass helmet such as Goliath wore, and he gave him a sword to buckle on. But David was both uncomfortable and unhappy with this heavy armor. He had never used such things in all his life, and he could not move around easily with them. Finally, he said to King Saul, "I cannot go with these, for I have not proved them." He meant he had not learned how to fight with armor. He thought he could fight Goliath better without it, and so he took it off. Staff in hand, David went to a brook and chose 5 smooth stones and put them in his shepherd's bag. Then taking his sling in his hand, he went to meet Goliath. When Goliath saw David, he was very angry. He had not expected such a young man to fight him. Neither did he expect someone to come without armor or sword. He called to David, "Am I a dog that thou comest to me with stones? Come to me, and I will give thy flesh to the fowls of the air and to the beasts of the field." Then David said to Goliath, "Thou comest to me with a sword and with a spear and with a shield, but I come to thee in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom thou hast defied. This day will the Lord deliver thee into my hand, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel." As Goliath came toward him, David put his hand into the little shepherd's bag and took out one of the 5 stones he had picked from the brook. Quickly he put it into his sling and shot it at Goliath. The stone hit the giant Philistine in his forehead, and he fell to the earth, dead. When the Philistines saw that their champion was dead, they fled. David was right. The Lord had blessed him and delivered him and all the Israelites out of the hands of the Philistines. The Lord will bless us as we keep the commandments. And I hope that we can be courageous just like David.